The space station terminal was full of noise and movement. Shuttles came and left every few minutes. Merchants shouted their prices. Travelers argued with clerks. And children ran between long metal benches. Humans and aliens stood in long lines, all waiting for their turn. In the middle of this restless crowd sat Daniel, a human worker returning from a long shift. His body was tired, his legs weak, but he was glad to finally find a seat. The bench was cold steel, but to him it felt like a blessing after hours of standing. He dropped his small bag beside him and leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Then he noticed movement nearby. An old alien elder was struggling through the crowd. The alien's skin was pale green. Marked with deep scars of age, his breathing was heavy, his forelegs shaking as he leaned on a wooden staff. Every step looked painful, yet no one stopped to help. People passed by as if he was invisible, too busy with their own lives. Daniel felt something stir in his chest. He thought of his own grandfather back on Earth. He remembered the way his grandfather's hands shook when he tried to stand. He remembered the tired eyes that silently begged for help, even when the old man never asked. Daniel could not ignore it. Slowly he stood up and called out, "Sir, please take my seat." His voice was calm but strong. The alien elder looked at him with surprise, his large eyes blinking for a moment. The elder seemed unsure if the offer was real. In this station, kindness was rare, but Daniel gently moved aside. He picked up his bag and stood tall, even though his legs ached from the long day. The elder lowered himself onto the bench with great care. A sigh escaped his mouth, part pain, part relief. He looked at Daniel, and for the first time a small smile appeared on his wrinkled face. "Thank you, human," the elder whispered. His voice was soft. Carrying years of weight, Daniel simply nodded. "It's nothing." But the people around had already started whispering. A few aliens stared at Daniel with frowns. Others raised their brows, curious why a human would give up comfort for someone not of his kind. Most ignored the act, dismissing it as foolish or unnecessary. To them, humans were outsiders. Weak workers, useful but never respected. Yet Daniel felt no shame. He leaned against the wall, holding his bag close. He stood quietly as the noise of the terminal grew louder. He thought it was just a simple act of kindness, nothing more, but then the air in the hall changed. The crowd grew tense. From the far doors came the sound of heavy boots striking the floor in rhythm. Everyone turned to look. A unit of alien soldiers marched into the terminal, their armor shining under the bright station lights. Their faces were hard, their steps sharp, their eyes cold. The noise of merchants and travelers began to die. Whispers replaced shouts. Children stopped running, hiding behind their mothers. Even the guards of the station stood straighter as the soldiers entered. Daniel noticed the soldiers' eyes scanning the hall. They were searching for something, or someone. His heart beat faster without knowing why. He told himself it had nothing to do with him. But when the soldiers' eyes locked on the bench where the alien elder sat, their expressions changed. They looked at the elder, then at Daniel, who was still standing nearby. One soldier raised a hand and the whole unit stopped in place. The sudden silence was heavy. The crowd held its breath, waiting to see what would happen. Daniel swallowed hard. Why were they looking here? He had done nothing wrong. He had only offered a seat to someone in pain. Yet the soldiers did not move their eyes away. Their gaze was sharp, filled with something he could not understand. The elder lowered his head as if he knew something Daniel did not. His hand rested on his staff, and his breathing slowed. For a brief moment, he looked almost regal despite his fragile body. Daniel's hands tightened on his bag strap. He stood straight, though inside his stomach turned. The soldiers began walking again, their boots echoing like thunder in the hall. Step by step they drew closer to Daniel and the elder. The crowd backed away, forming a circle. No one spoke. No one dared to move. Daniel's mind raced. Would they accuse him of disrespect? Would they punish him for touching someone important? He had no idea why the soldiers were coming, but every instinct told him that his life was about to change. The act that felt so small a few moments ago was no longer small. The simple seat he gave up was now the center of attention for the entire terminal. Every pair of eyes was on him. The whispers grew into fear, into suspense. Something was about to happen. Something that would shake the station. And Daniel, the tired human worker, stood right in the middle of it, unaware that his kindness had already changed everything. The echo of armored boots filled the terminal. Each step was heavy, each sound sharp. The alien soldiers moved in perfect rhythm, their polished armor reflecting the station's bright lights. The crowd pressed back against the walls, afraid to even breathe too loud. Daniel stood near the elder, his bag gripped in his hand. He could feel his pulse racing in his chest. Why were the soldiers looking at him? He had only given up his seat. Nothing more, yet every glance, every sharp eye, seemed to cut straight through him. The elder sat quietly on the bench. His long fingers rested on his staff. His back was bent with age, but in that moment, his posture held a strange dignity. His eyes were lowered, yet there was no fear in them. It was as if he knew this moment was inevitable. The soldiers came closer. Their captain, taller than the rest, scanned the terminal like a hunter searching for prey. His helmet was open, showing a scarred face with hard, silver eyes. Those eyes found Daniel, and for an instant Daniel felt frozen. The captain's stare was not the look of a stranger. It was recognition, but recognition of what? Daniel was only a worker, a man with no rank, no name in the galaxy. How could a soldier look at him with such intensity? The whispers in the crowd grew louder. Why are they stopping here? Did the human do something? Maybe he insulted the elder? Suspicion mixed with fear, every alien eye was now on Daniel, judging him, waiting for soldiers to strike. Daniel wanted to speak. He wanted to explain that all he had done was offer a seat, but his throat was dry, his words stuck like stones. The soldiers marched right up to him and the elder, then stopped. The silence was painful. Even the engines of the arriving shuttle sounded distant compared to the stillness in that hall. The captain raised his arm. The unit snapped to attention, their movements sharp, disciplined like blades cutting through the air. Every traveler in the terminal leaned forward. Waiting for the command, Daniel braced himself. Was this the moment he would be dragged away? Would they accuse him of insulting an elder? His stomach twisted, his palms sweaty. He knew he would not resist, but his heart screamed against the unfairness. The elder slowly lifted his head. His tired eyes looked at the soldiers, then at Daniel. And then something strange happened. The soldiers' cold expressions shifted. Hard lines softened. Their jaws tightened not in anger but in respect. The captain's eyes no longer pierced Daniel with suspicion, but with something heavier like judgment mixed with honor. The captain gave a short command in his alien tongue. The words rolled deep, heavy with tradition. The soldiers' boots slammed once on the floor, then all at once. They shifted their rifles to their sides and raised their hands in salute. The gesture was crisp, flawless, a movement of discipline taught for generations. The entire terminal gasped. Nobody had expected this. A salute towards a human? Daniel froze, unable to move. His mind screamed in confusion. Why would soldiers of another species, proud warriors, offer such respect? He looked behind him, thinking maybe it was for someone else. But there was only the old elder on the bench, breathing slowly, and Daniel himself standing at his side. The captain lowered his salute first. His silver eyes did not leave Daniel. The silence of the crowd grew heavier. Mothers held their children tighter. Merchants forgot their goods. Even the guards of the station bowed their heads slightly, uncertain what they were witnessing. Daniel felt his knees weaken. He wanted to ask what this meant, but his voice betrayed him. All he could do was whisper to himself, This can't be real." The elder finally spoke. His voice was quiet but strong. "This is not for me," he said slowly, turning his gaze toward Daniel. The human's heart skipped a beat. "Then, who?" Daniel asked, his throat dry. The elder's lips curled into the smallest of smiles. "For you," he said. "For the kindness you showed when no one else would." Daniel's head spun. How could a simple act of giving a seat earn such honor? It made no sense, and yet, here stood soldiers saluting him. Their discipline, their respect, it was not a mistake. They knew exactly what they were doing. The captain lowered his salute fully. He stepped forward until he stood only a meter away from Daniel. For the first time, he spoke in clear, firm words that echoed in the hall. "Honor must be answered with honor." The words struck like thunder. Every whisper in the crowd fell silent. Even Daniel's breath caught in his chest. He looked into the captain's scarred face. There was no anger, no hatred, only respect so deep it felt heavier than any punishment could have been. The soldier's eyes stayed locked on him. It was not a salute to a man of power, not a salute to a leader or general. It was a salute to a human who chose compassion when no one else did. And somehow that single choice had shaken the entire station. The crowd would never forget the image. A lone human standing while alien soldiers saluted him. An elder sitting with calm dignity, watching it all unfold. And silence stretching across the terminal like a storm before lightning. Daniel's mind spun with fear and disbelief, but deep inside, he felt something else stirring. Something he had never felt before on this station. Not weakness, not shame, not being looked down upon, but respect. Respect that could change everything. The terminal stood frozen in time. Merchants no longer shouted. Children no longer cried. Even the hum of the station's engine seemed far away. All eyes were locked on the same sight. A row of armed alien soldiers, their heads lifted high, their hands raised in a crisp salute. And the target of that salute was not a commander, not a decorated officer, but a simple human standing awkwardly with his bag clutched tight. Daniel could hardly breathe. His legs felt heavy, his mouth dry. He had spent years in this station being overlooked, pushed aside, treated as less. Humans were workers here, never leaders, never respected, yet now, the very soldiers that once ignored his kind were giving him honor. The weight of their gaze was crushing, as if the galaxy itself had turned to look at him. The crowd broke into whispers. Why him? A human? Impossible. Do you think he knows what this means? The words traveled like fire. Filling every corner of the hall, Daniel's heart raced. He wanted to step back to melt into the wall, but he could not move. The elder beside him sat quietly, his wrinkled face calm. It was as if the elder had expected this from the moment Daniel offered his seat. The captain lowered his hand first. The salute ended, but the silence remained. Then he spoke with a voice like steel. Respect given must be respected in return. His words rolled through the hall. Powerful, undeniable. Daniel blinked, confused. He wanted to shout, "I only gave up a seat."
That's all.
But no one would believe that was all it was. The air was too heavy, the soldiers too serious. Something larger was happening, something far beyond his understanding. The elder slowly lifted his gaze. His deep eyes looked at Daniel, then at the soldiers with a tired hand. He tapped his staff on the floor, a sound like an ancient drum. The soldiers shifted slightly, lowering their weapons, their stances turning from hard to solemn. Then the elder spoke, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "You salute not me, but the kindness of this man." Gasps spread through the crowd. A murmur of disbelief shook the walls. Aliens who once sneered at humans now stared at Daniel as if he carried a crown of fire. Children whispered, "He is chosen," while adults frowned, struggling to understand. Daniel's chest tightened, he shook his head, whispering, No, I'm nobody. I just stood up." But his words were swallowed by the storm of voices around him. To them this was not a small act, it was a symbol, a spark in the darkness of indifference. The captain stepped closer, his scar catching the light. He looked at Daniel with eyes that no longer saw him as weak. "Do you understand what you have done?" he asked. Daniel stammered, I only gave him my seat." The captain's lips curved into something between a smile and a grim line. "And that, human, is exactly why it matters." The elder placed a trembling hand on Daniel's arm. His touch was warm, though his skin was rough from age. "You remind them," the elder said softly, "that honor is not found in strength alone, but in compassion." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He never wanted attention, never wanted to stand out, yet here he was, turned into a symbol by an act he thought was nothing. The soldiers lowered their rifles fully. They stood in silence, watching, protecting. It was no longer Daniel who feared them. It was the crowd who now looked at Daniel with a mix of awe and jealousy. For the first time, the power of soldiers was not in their weapons, but in the respect they gave to one human. A station officer finally pushed through the crowd, his uniform crisp, his voice sharp. "What is the meaning of this disturbance?" He barked, but even he faltered when he saw the scene. The salute, the elder, the human standing like the center of a storm. The captain turned to him. "The meaning is clear," he replied firmly. "Honor must be answered. Even by us." The officer swallowed his words. He was not brave enough to challenge soldiers who spoke with that kind of certainty. He stepped back, allowing the moment to stand untouched. Daniel's mind raced. He wanted to run, to hide. But something inside whispered, "Stay." He looked at the elder, who nodded slowly, his eyes shining with something deeper than gratitude. The old alien whispered, "The galaxy watches, young man, more than you know." The words made Daniel's chest feel heavy. What did the elder mean? Why would a single act matter to the galaxy? But before he could ask, the soldiers began to turn, forming a protective circle. Their formation was not one of aggression. It was one of honor, as if Daniel was no longer just a man, but someone worth guarding. The crowd could hardly believe it. A human, protected by soldiers, honored by salute, acknowledged by an elder. The story would spread like fire beyond these walls. Whispers would turn into tales, tales into legends. And all of it had started with one act. Offering a seat, Daniel felt the weight of it pressing down. The attention was suffocating, but at the same time, something in his heart began to burn. For the first time he felt that maybe, just maybe, being human meant something more here. As the soldier stood tall and the elder closed his eyes in quiet satisfaction, the terminal knew one truth. This moment would never be forgotten. The salute had frozen the hall, and with it, the fate of a human named Daniel was forever changed. The station terminal slowly returned to sound. Whispers filled the air like restless waves. Merchants leaned over their stalls. Travelers forgot their tickets. Children peeked out from behind their mothers' clothes. Everyone wanted to know who the old alien was and why the soldiers had saluted a human because of him. Daniel still stood frozen. His bag clutched tight, his legs trembled, but not from fear alone. Something far heavier weighed on him. He turned toward the elder, searching his wrinkled face for answers. The elder, however, sat straight now, his back no longer bent in weakness. There was a quiet dignity in his posture, as if he had shed years of age in a single breath. The captain of the soldiers stepped aside, lowering his head slightly toward the elder. That tiny movement made the crowd gasp again. Soldiers never bowed to civilians, never. Yet here was a captain, scarred and proud. Lowering his gaze in respect, Daniel's voice finally cracked through the silence. Who are you? The words slipped out before he could stop them. The elder's eyes, deep and ancient, turned toward him. A small smile played on his thin lips. You gave me your seat, human, the elder said. But you gave me more than that. You gave me honor when all others looked away. Daniel shook his head. That doesn't answer me, he whispered. The elder let out a low chuckle. But it was not unkind. You deserve to know. Since fate has tied you to me now, he leaned on his staff, lifting it slightly so the metal tip tapped against the floor. The sharp sound carried across the hall, forcing silence once more. Then he spoke, his voice not loud but filled with weight that commanded attention. My name is Varric, son of Kale, he said. Gasps erupted instantly. Several older aliens in the crowd raised their hands to their mouths. Some even bowed their heads without realizing it. Daniel looked around, confused. Varric. Who is Varric? He asked. But the crowd knew, and their faces told the story before the elder even continued. Varric's eyes hardened, his voice steady. Once, I was a general of the sovereign armies, he said. I led the defense of the homeworld during the Great War. Daniel blinked. He had heard whispers of the Great War, old stories told in worker quarters. A war so brutal entire planets had been left in ruin. A war that shaped borders of the galaxy for centuries. And now this fragile old man before him was claiming to be one of its legends. The elder's gaze swept across the hall. After the war, I vanished, he said quietly. I laid down my rank, my titles, and I walked away from power. Why? Daniel asked, unable to stop himself. Varric's eyes dimmed with sorrow. Because war takes more than it gives, he answered. I could not bear the weight of my victories, for they were written in the blood of too many. The crowd listened. Silent and breathless, the soldiers stood firm, but their eyes betrayed respect that bordered on worship. Daniel finally understood. The salute had not been for him alone. It had been for Varric, the lost general, a living legend hidden in plain sight. But the elder was not finished. He turned back to Daniel, his voice gentler now. Do you see, human? Even one such as I was left to wander unseen, treated as nothing by this crowd. His wrinkled hand gestured weakly toward the people around them. Not one soul offered me kindness until you. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He wanted to say it was nothing, that anyone would have done the same. But the elder's eyes burned with truth. No, Varric said firmly. Not anyone. Only you. The weight of those words pressed down on Daniel harder than any soldier's weapon could. He felt the stares of the crowd, some jealous, some awed, some filled with shame for ignoring the elder. And inside him, confusion swirled with fear and something else he did not want to name. Pride. The captain stepped forward. General Varick, he said with deep respect, we thought you lost. Why reveal yourself now? Varick tapped his staff again, the sharp sound echoing. Because this human reminded me that honor still breathes in this galaxy, he said, and I could not stay hidden any longer. The whispers in the crowd grew into waves again. A legendary general hidden as a frail elder now revealed, and the key to his return was a human worker who gave up his seat. Daniel's mind spun. He wanted to deny it, to escape from the attention. But when he looked at Varick's face, he saw no lies, only the heavy truth of history staring back. Varick leaned closer, his voice only for Daniel now. You think you were small, boy, he said softly. But sometimes it is the smallest stone that changes the path of a river. Daniel shivered at the words. He could feel eyes burning into his back. The crowd now saw him differently, not as a worker, not as an outsider, but as the man who had awakened a legend, and deep inside, Daniel knew nothing would ever be the same again. The secret of the elder was no longer secret. The galaxy would hear of this, and with it, the human's name would spread farther than he ever dreamed. All because of one act, one seat offered, one kindness given. The elder's secret was out, and Daniel's life had just become part of history. The news did not stay in the terminal. Like sparks leaping from a fire, it spread quickly through the station's endless halls. By the time Daniel left the crowded terminal, the story was already running ahead of him. Merchants carried it to the markets, pilots carried it to their ships. Guards whispered it to one another, and everywhere, people repeated the same words. A human gave his seat to an elder, and soldiers saluted him. Daniel tried to keep his head down as he walked through the wide corridors, but heads turned wherever he went. Some stared with awe, others with suspicion, and a few with open hostility. It felt strange to him, being noticed at all. For years he had been invisible, just another tired worker among thousands. Now even strangers' eyes followed his every step. In the canteen, workers gathered around long tables. They whispered while pretending not to look at him. One alien muttered, "That's him." "The human from the terminal," another replied. "Nonsense, you think the soldiers would salute that? Just a worker in old boots?" But the first leaned closer, lowering his voice. "They say the elder he helped was General Varick." "The Varick?" The second alien's eyes widened, and the whisper spread farther down the line. Daniel sat in the corner with his tray of food. He barely touched it, his appetite gone. The sound of whispers around him grew too loud to ignore. Every laugh, every hushed voice felt like it was about him. He wanted to shout that he was no hero, no symbol, just a man who had done something small, but the story had already taken a life of its own. When he left the canteen, a group of children followed him, their small feet echoing on the metal floor. One bold child called out, "Mister, did you really make the soldiers salute?" Daniel stopped, turning to see their curious faces. He forced a smile. "No, I didn't make them. I just gave someone my seat." The children exchanged wide-eyed looks. As if that answer was even more magical, they ran off, shouting the story louder, their voices carrying it into more ears. By evening, the station markets were alive with rumor. Merchants used the story to attract customers. "Step closer. Hear the tale of the human who earned the salute of warriors," one barked. Others exaggerated, saying Daniel had saved the elder's life, that he had stood against the crowd, or even challenged guards, with each telling. The truth bent further. The simple act of kindness was turning into legend. Not everyone admired it. Some aliens frowned deeply when they heard the story. "They are trying to raise humans higher than they deserve," one spat. "First a seat, next they'll claim a throne," another sneered. Old prejudice burned strong, and Daniel could feel it in the stares of those who disliked the tale. In the barracks, soldiers who had not been in the terminal demanded answers from those who were. Did he truly stand tall? Was General Varick really there? The soldiers who had saluted kept their words short, but even they could not hide the respect in their tone. The story spread through military channels, whispered across comms somewhere far away. Officers of higher rank were already asking questions. Daniel, meanwhile, sat alone in his small workers' quarters. The walls were bare, the light dim, his bag sitting on the floor beside him. He stared at his hands, calloused and tired. "Why me?" he whispered. He could still hear Varick's words echoing in his mind. "Sometimes the smallest stone changes the path of a river." He shook his head. He was no stone, no symbol, just a man who wanted to rest his legs, yet now, The weight of the station's whispers pressed against him from all sides. It was too big, too heavy. Then came the knock at his door. Sharp, steady, and unmistakable. Daniel's stomach tightened when he opened it. Two of the armored soldiers stood waiting. They did not raise their weapons. Nor did they speak harshly. One simply said, "You are requested." "Requested?" Daniel asked, his voice uncertain. "By who?" The soldier's silver eyes met his. "By General Varick." Daniel froze. The elder had found him again, but why? What more could he possibly want? The soldier stepped aside, gesturing for Daniel to follow, and though his legs trembled, Daniel obeyed. As he walked through the quiet corridors between the soldiers, he noticed more heads turning. More whispers followed him. Some voices spoke with awe, others with jealousy, others with fear. The human who had done the impossible. The human who carried the honor of a general. The human who had shaken the station with nothing more than kindness. The whispers were no longer just noise. They were a storm, and Daniel knew deep down that storms never stayed small. The soldiers led Daniel through long, winding corridors of the station. Their boots struck the metal floor in steady rhythm, a sound that echoed in the silence. Daniel's heart pounded with every step. He did not know where they were taking him, only that the whispers behind him grew quieter the farther they went. Finally, they reached a set of tall doors. Guarded by two more soldiers, the doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a wide chamber lit by warm golden lamps instead of the usual harsh station lights. Inside, seated on a low cushioned chair, was the elder General Varick, though his body was still frail. The light caught the sharpness of his eyes, making him look younger than before. The soldiers stopped, standing aside. Daniel hesitated at the doorway. Clutching his bag as if it were a shield, Varick lifted his staff slightly and spoke. "Come in, human," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. Daniel stepped forward slowly, the doors closing behind him with a final hiss. For a moment the room was quiet. Varick studied him, his old eyes watching every move. Daniel felt uneasy, as though he was standing in front of a judge. Finally, the elder broke the silence. "You wonder why I called for you?" he said. Daniel nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I don't understand any of this. I only gave you a seat." A soft laugh escaped the elder. "Indeed you did," Varick replied. "And in that small act, you reminded soldiers of something greater than their training. You reminded them of honor." Daniel shook his head. "Anyone could have done it," he said. "No," Varick answered firmly, tapping his staff on the floor, "but no one did." "That is the difference," the words stung Daniel. Not as insult, but as truth. He remembered the crowd in the terminal, the way everyone had looked away, pretending not to see the elder's struggle. He had not done anything heroic, only what felt right. And yet, that one choice had changed everything. Varick leaned back, his gaze softening. "I left the galaxy after the Great War because I lost faith in its people," he confessed. "I believe compassion had died, replaced only by power, greed and pride, but you, a human, have shown me that it still lives. That is why I reveal myself now." Daniel swallowed hard. Unsure what to say, the elder's words were heavy, and he felt too small to carry them. "Why me?" he whispered. "I'm not a soldier, not a leader. I'm just a worker." Varick smiled faintly. "That is why you matter," he said, "because honor shown by the powerful is expected. But honor shown by the ordinary, that is true strength." The soldiers around the room bowed their heads slightly at those words. Even they, hardened by discipline, seemed moved. Then Varick raised his staff again. "I will not let this moment pass quietly," he said. "I wish to honor you, human. Before all who live on this station." Daniel's eyes widened. "Honor me. No, please, I don't want that kind of attention," he said quickly. But Varick shook his head. "It is not about what you want," he said gently. "It is about what the galaxy needs. They need a reminder. They need a symbol." Daniel felt his stomach twist. He did not want to be a symbol. He had never asked for glory or attention. All he wanted was a quiet life, to finish his shifts, to eat in peace, to sleep without worry. But deep inside, he also knew the elder was right. The galaxy had noticed, and the whispers could not be undone. Varick extended a hand, his long fingers trembling. "Sit with me," he said. "Share my seat as you once gave me yours." Daniel hesitated, then slowly lowered himself beside the elder. It felt strange, sitting next to a figure who had once commanded armies. But Varric's presence was warm, almost grandfatherly. The old general leaned closer and whispered, "When the soldiers saluted you, they saluted more than a man. They saluted what you represent. Do not run from it." Daniel looked down, his hands shaking. "I'm afraid," he admitted softly. Varric nodded. "Good. Fear keeps you humble. But do not let it chain you. You have already changed more than you know." The soldier stepped forward, their captain placing a hand over his chest. "General," he said, "shall we prepare the hall?" Varric nodded. "Yes. Tomorrow the station will witness honor given properly." Daniel turned quickly. "The hall? What are you talking about?" Varric looked at him with calm certainty. "Tomorrow before all you will be seated at my side, and the galaxy will see that even the smallest act of kindness can shake empires." Daniel's breath caught in his chest. The idea of standing before crowds, of being honored, terrified him, but at the same time, something in his chest stirred. Something he could not deny. A flicker of pride, a spark of hope. Could one small act truly mean so much? As the soldiers escorted him back to his quarters, Daniel's mind swirled. The whispers outside were louder now. Thicker, heavier. Some voices admired him. Others resented him, but all knew his name. Tomorrow, the whispers would not be whispers anymore. Tomorrow they would become shouts, and Daniel, the man who gave up his seat, would have no place to hide. The next day came faster than Daniel wished. He hardly slept in his quarters every time he closed his eyes. He saw soldiers saluting him, crowds whispering, and Varric's words echoing in his head. "Tomorrow you will be seated at my side, and the galaxy will see." By morning the station was different. The usual noise of merchants and travelers was still there, but layered over it was a nervous energy. Everyone talked about one thing, the human and the elder. Some came hoping to witness history, others came ready to mock, and a few came burning with anger that a human could stand in such honor. Daniel was escorted through long metal corridors by soldiers. This time he didn't walk alone. Dozens of eyes followed him as he passed. Some bowed their heads, some spat at the ground, but none ignored him. He had become impossible to ignore. The hall they entered was vast. It was the same terminal where it had all started, but transformed overnight. Banners of deep red and gold hung from the ceiling. Seats were cleared so a stage could be placed at the center. Soldiers lined the walls in perfect formation, their armor gleaming under bright white lights, and at the heart of it sat Varric the Elder, dressed not in rags but in ceremonial robes. The robes were simple, yet carried symbols of the old sovereign army. Even bent with age, he looked like the general he once was. The crowd filled every corner, merchants, workers, guards, families, all pressed together, waiting. And then the whispers began again. "There he is, the human. Look, he's with the soldiers. Do you think he deserves it?" Deserve or not, the elder chose him. Daniel's throat tightened as he was led to the stage. His boots felt too heavy, his hands too empty. He wanted to disappear, but every step carried him closer to the place Varric had promised. The elder raised his staff as Daniel approached. The sound of its tip striking the floor cut through the noise like thunder. The hall fell silent. Even the hum of the station's engines seemed distant. "Behold," Varric's voice rang out. It was old but strong, carrying to every corner of the hall. "Once I was a general of armies. I fought wars that scarred planets. I led soldiers into battles that left worlds in ruin. But I left that behind, for honor had been lost." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the crowd. "Yesterday, in this very hall, one human showed me honor again. Not with weapons, not with power, but with kindness." The hall rippled with murmurs. Some leaned forward, listening with wide eyes. Others frowned, shaking their heads. Varric lifted his hand and pointed to Daniel. This man gave his seat when no one else would. He saw pain and answered it with respect. Soldiers saw it, and they remembered what honor means. Daniel felt heat flood his face. He wanted to shrink, but the soldiers behind him stood firm. He realized running was no longer possible. The moment was too big, too heavy. Varric's voice grew sharper. "From this day, let it be known, honor is not the property of one race nor one people. It belongs to any who choose it. And yesterday a human chose it." The soldiers struck their boots on the ground, the sound echoing like a drumbeat. Then, all at once, they raised their arms in salute, not just to Varric this time, but to Daniel as well. The hall gasped. Hundreds of eyes turned to the human, the worker, the one no one had seen before. Now he stood tall whether he wanted to or not. Daniel's chest rose and fell with uneven breath. He whispered to himself, I didn't do this for them, I just couldn't ignore it. But the truth didn't matter anymore. To the crowd, to the soldiers, to the galaxy, he was already a symbol. The station commander stepped forward, his voice strained. General Varric, this will change everything. Varric nodded. That is the point, he said. The galaxy must remember that greatness can come from the smallest act. The commander had no reply. He bowed his head instead, and the hall filled with uneasy silence once more. Daniel looked at the sea of faces. Some were angry, others inspired, many confused, but he could feel something shifting in the air. A change he had never imagined. Humans were no longer invisible here, not after this. Not after soldiers saluted one of them, not after a general declared him a symbol of honor. As Varric placed a trembling hand on Daniel's shoulder, the old general whispered, You gave me your seat, human. Today I give you a place in history. Daniel's eyes burned, though he tried to hide it. He thought of his grandfather back on Earth, tired and unseen. He thought of every day he had walked these halls unnoticed, and now every whisper carried his name. The hall erupted, not in cheers, not in anger, but in something heavier, a silence of respect, a silence that shook deeper than sound. For in that moment the station changed, and with it, so did the galaxy's view of humans. One seat offered, one elder honored, and the universe would never look at Daniel or his people the same way again.